I've been a patrol officer with the Mendocino County Sheriff's Department for 12 years, and what happened on September 15, 2023, still makes me question everything I thought I knew about how far someone can fall from society. What we discovered in those woods that night changed how our entire department handles missing persons cases in remote areas. It started as a routine call around 3:30 p.m. I was driving Unit 23, a 2020 Ford Explorer police interceptor, when dispatch crackled over the radio about campers who'd failed to check out of Pine Ridge State Park. The family had reserved campsite 47 for 3 nights, but hadn't been seen since Tuesday morning. Park rangers found their 2019 Honda Pilot still parked at the site, camping gear scattered, but no sign of the family. Pine Ridge sits about 40 miles northeast of Ukiah, where the coastal mountains meet dense redwood forests. It's popular with Bay Area families seeking weekend getaways, but the terrain can be unforgiving. Cell service is spotty, and the nearest hospital is an hour away on winding mountain roads. Perfect place for an accident to turn deadly. I met Park Ranger Lisa Martinez at the main gate. She'd been working Pine Ridge for 8 years and knew every trail. "Something's not right about this one, Deputy Henderson," she said, leading me toward the campsite. "The Yamamoto family, parents and 2 kids, ages 7 and 9. They're experienced campers, had all the right gear. But their tent was slashed open from the outside." The campsite told a disturbing story. The family's blue Coleman dome tent had 3 long cuts across the front panel, clean slashes that looked deliberate. Personal items were scattered in a rough circle around the fire pit: clothes, toys, a tablet computer. But the expensive camping equipment remained untouched. No signs of animal activity, no drag marks, no blood. "Any other incidents reported in the area?" I asked, photographing the scene with my department-issued camera. Martinez nodded grimly. 3 complaints in the past month about someone harassing campers. Families reported a man approaching their sites after dark, standing just outside the firelight without speaking. When they called out, he'd disappear into the trees. Park management figured it was just stories. You know how campfire tales get embellished. We began searching the immediate area as daylight faded. The October air was crisp, and fog was rolling in from the coast. I'd called for backup, but the nearest available unit was 40 minutes away. Martinez led me along the main trail, explaining the park's layout and recent visitor patterns. About a quarter mile from the campsite, we found the first real evidence. A child's shoe, small, pink, with cartoon characters, sitting in the middle of the trail. Not dropped accidentally, but placed deliberately. Martinez confirmed it matched the description of what 9-year-old Emma Yamamoto had been wearing. "He's leading us somewhere," I realized, feeling the weight of my service weapon against my hip. This wasn't a missing persons case anymore. This was a predator playing games. We followed the trail deeper into the forest, finding items every few hundred yards. A hair tie. A small backpack. A juice box. Each item placed where we couldn't miss it, like breadcrumbs in a fairy tale. The forest grew denser, the established trails giving way to deer paths and animal tracks. Then we heard it, a low, rhythmic sound echoing through the trees. Not quite singing, not quite chanting. Human voices, but distorted by distance and the acoustic properties of the forest. Martinez grabbed my arm, her face pale in the dying light. "That's coming from the old growth section," she whispered. "There's supposed to be a mining claim back there from the 1800s, but it's been abandoned for decades. We don't patrol that area because it's too dangerous. Unstable mine shafts, rotting timber structures." I radioed for my backup to meet us at the trailhead and requested additional units. We were entering unknown territory, potentially with a dangerous individual who had already demonstrated his willingness to harm families. But with 4 people missing, including 2 children, we couldn't wait for a full tactical response. The sounds grew clearer as we approached. Definitely human voices, but there was something wrong with the rhythm, the intonation. It reminded me of recordings I'd heard of cult ceremonies, repetitive, hypnotic, designed to break down individual thought. We emerged into a clearing where the remains of an old mining operation created a natural amphitheater. Rusted equipment and collapsed wooden structures dotted the landscape. And there, in the center of the clearing, was a scene that still haunts my dreams. The Yamamoto family sat in a circle around a small fire, their hands bound behind their backs with climbing rope. They were alive but clearly terrified. Standing behind them was a man who looked like he'd been living in the forest for years. Wild gray hair, torn clothing patched with animal fur, skin darkened by exposure and dirt. He was holding a hunting knife and speaking in a low, continuous monologue. "The forest provides," he was saying, over and over. "The forest cleanses. The forest decides who stays and who goes." Martinez and I took positions behind different trees, about 30 yards from the clearing. I could see the man more clearly now, probably in his 50s, thin but wiry, moving with the fluid confidence of someone completely comfortable in the wilderness. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was someone who'd been planning, practicing, perfecting his technique. The man stopped his chanting and looked directly at our hiding spot. "I know you're there," he said calmly. "The forest told me you were coming. It's been waiting for you." I stepped into the clearing with my weapon drawn but not aimed. "This is Deputy Henderson with the Mendocino County Sheriff's Department. I need you to step away from the family and put down the knife." He smiled, revealing teeth stained brown by years of poor hygiene. "Deputy Henderson, the forest has been expecting you. It told me about the others too, the ones who came before, who tried to take away what belongs here." "What others?" I asked, trying to keep him talking while Martinez worked her way around the clearing's perimeter. "The families who thought they could just come and go as they pleased. The ones who left their trash, their noise, their disrespect. The forest dealt with them, just like it will deal with these." He gestured toward the Yamamoto family with his knife. The implications hit me like a physical blow. We weren't dealing with a single incident. This man had been operating in these woods for months, possibly years. The missing persons reports that had been filed as people choosing to disappear, the abandoned campsites attributed to people getting spooked by wildlife, the occasional human remains found by hikers and assumed to be old mining accidents. "How many?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "The forest keeps count," he said. 17 who stayed. Hundreds who ran. The smart ones listen when the forest speaks. The stupid ones..." He shrugged. That's when I noticed the smell. Under the wood's smoke and forest scents, there was something else. Something organic and wrong. Looking around the clearing more carefully, I saw disturbed earth, areas where the vegetation looked too green, too lush. Fertilized ground. Martinez appeared at the edge of the clearing with her radio, calling for immediate backup and a coroner's team. The man, later identified as Robert Chen, a former software engineer who disappeared from San Francisco 3 years earlier, saw her and his demeanor changed instantly. "You brought the corrupted one," he snarled. "The forest doesn't like the corrupted ones." He raised the knife toward the youngest Yamamoto child, 7-year-old Kevin. That's when I made the decision that ended my career as a patrol officer and started my transfer to the Detective Bureau. I won't detail what happened next. The department's official report covers the tactical response. What matters is that the family survived, Chin was taken into custody, and the subsequent investigation revealed the full scope of his activities. 17 confirmed victims over a 30-month period. Families who'd come to Pine Ridge for weekend getaways and never returned home. The case file is sealed, but Chen's interrogation revealed a methodical predator who'd used the forest as both hunting ground and disposal site. He'd been escalating his activities, growing bolder, more sophisticated in his techniques. If we hadn't responded to that campsite on September 15th, the Yamamoto family would have become victims 18 through 21. Chin was convicted on multiple counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. But here's what keeps me awake at night. During his psychological evaluation, he insisted he wasn't working alone. He claimed there were others, scattered throughout the state park system, people who'd heard the forest's call, and were protecting the wilderness from corruption. The FBI opened an investigation into missing persons cases at other state parks, but it's been classified above my clearance level. What I can tell you is that Chen's case wasn't isolated. There have been similar incidents at parks in Northern California, Oregon, and Washington. People who disappear into the wilderness and come back changed, territorial, violent. The official story is that Robert Chen was a mentally ill individual who snapped under the pressure of modern life and retreated into the forest where his delusions grew unchecked. That's what the department tells the media, what they put in the press releases. But I've seen the crime scene photos. I've read the interview transcripts. And I've heard the recordings of what Chen was saying during those ceremonies in the clearing. There was a pattern to it, a structure that suggested coordination, training, shared methodology. 3 days after Chen's arrest, I received a call that would connect his case to something much larger. A detective from the Oregon State Police wanted to compare notes about a similar incident at Crater Lake National Park. What he told me suggested that Chen wasn't the end of this story, he was just the beginning. Have you ever felt like you were being watched while camping or hiking? Like someone was moving through the forest just outside your vision, keeping pace with you on the trail? What's the most unsettling experience you've had in the wilderness? Because after working this case, I can tell you that sometimes the most dangerous predator in the forest isn't the one with 4 legs and sharp teeth. Next time you're planning a camping trip to a remote area, maybe consider staying somewhere with better cell service and closer to civilization. The forest might be beautiful, but it's also the perfect place for someone to disappear forever. I've been a detective with the Sacramento Police Department for 9 years, and what happened during our investigation in November 2023 still makes me question how well we can really know someone's intentions. What started as a routine missing persons case revealed a predator who'd been operating under our noses for over 2 years, using dating apps and social media to hunt victims with surgical precision. The case began on November 3rd when Marcus Thompson walked into our station to report his roommate missing. Daniel Rodriguez, 28 years old, 6'2" with black hair, worked as a financial analyst downtown. He'd gone on a first date the previous evening and never came home. "This isn't like Danny at all," Thompson insisted, sitting across from my desk in interview room B. "He always texts me when he's staying out late, especially on dates. His phone goes straight to voicemail, and his last Instagram post was yesterday afternoon." I was working the case with my partner, Detective Angela Foster, who transferred to our sexual crimes unit from Oakland PD 6 months earlier. She had experience with predators who use technology to target victims, and something about Thompson's report caught her attention immediately. "What dating app did your roommate use?" Foster asked, pulling out her notepad. "Mostly Tinder and Bumble," Thompson replied. "He showed me the woman's profile yesterday before he left. Said her name was Jessica, really attractive brunette, worked in marketing. They'd been messaging for about a week." Foster and I exchanged glances. We'd seen this pattern before. Attractive profiles used to lure victims into meeting in person. But something felt different about this case, more organized, more deliberate. We drove to Rodriguez's apartment complex on J Street in a 2021 Chevrolet Tahoe, one of our department's newer unmarked units. The building was typical for young professionals: secure entry, covered parking, decent neighborhood. Rodriguez's blue 2018 Toyota Camry was still in his assigned space, which meant he'd either walked to his date or been picked up. Thompson led us into the apartment, which was clean and organized. Rodriguez's laptop was still open on the kitchen counter, logged into his dating profiles. Foster started scrolling through his recent conversations while I examined his bedroom and personal effects. "Tom, you need to see this," Foster called from the kitchen. Her voice had that edge it gets when she's spotted something significant. On Rodriguez's laptop screen was a conversation with Jessica M. The profile photo showed an attractive woman in her early 30s with shoulder-length brown hair and a warm smile. But as Foster scrolled through the messages, a pattern emerged that made my stomach tighten. The woman had asked very specific questions about Rodriguez's physical appearance, his work schedule, his living situation. She'd suggested meeting at a wine bar called Meridian on 16th Street, claiming it was one of her favorites. Most telling, she'd insisted he come alone and not tell anyone about their date because she Value privacy in the early stages of dating. Classic isolation tactics, Foster observed. She's gathering intelligence and ensuring he won't have backup or witnesses. We drove to Meridian Wine Bar, hoping to review their security footage from the previous evening. The manager, a woman named Patricia Wong, remembered the couple clearly. They sat at the corner table around 8 p.m. Wong told us, pointing to a spot with limited visibility from the main dining area. The woman was very specific about that table, said she had a reservation, but we don't take reservations. The man seemed nervous, kept checking his phone. How long were they here? I asked. Maybe an hour. The woman paid in cash, which was unusual. They left together through the side exit that leads to the parking garage. Wong provided us with security footage from their internal cameras. The video quality was decent, showing Rodriguez arriving alone and meeting a woman who matched Jessica's profile. But something about her body language seemed off, too controlled, too aware of camera angles. She knows she's being recorded, Foster noted as we watched the footage in Wong's office. Look how she keeps her face turned away from the main camera, positions herself so Rodriguez blocks the view. The side exit footage showed them leaving together, but the woman's face was partially obscured by her hair and the angle. What we could see was that she was taller than her profile suggested, probably 5'8" or 9, and moved with confident, purposeful strides. Back at the station, Foster ran the profile photos through reverse image search while I contacted other dating platforms to see if similar profiles existed. What we found opened up a case that went far beyond one missing person. The photos are stolen, Foster announced, turning her computer screen toward me. They belong to a marketing executive named Sarah Chin who lives in Portland. According to her LinkedIn, she has no idea her photos are being used on dating profiles. My search revealed something even more disturbing. Similar profiles, always attractive brunettes named Jessica, Jennifer, or Julie, appeared on multiple dating platforms across Northern California. The profiles were sophisticated, with consistent backstories and carefully curated photos that avoided reverse image detection. This isn't opportunistic, I realized. Someone's running multiple fake profiles simultaneously, casting a wide net. We decided to check with other law enforcement agencies to see if they'd encountered similar cases. That's when Detective Ray Martinez from the Fresno Police Department called me back with information that changed everything. We've had 3 missing persons cases in the past 18 months that match your description, Martinez told me over the phone. All men between 25 and 35, all tall with dark hair, all disappeared after first dates with women they met online. The women's profiles always get deleted within hours of the men going missing. Foster and I drove down to Fresno the next morning in my personal vehicle, a 2019 Ford F-150, to review their case files. The similarities were undeniable. Each victim had been carefully selected based on specific physical characteristics, isolated through the dating process, and had vanished completely after meeting their dates. The profiles are getting more sophisticated, Martinez explained, spreading crime scene photos across his desk. Earlier cases used obvious stock photos, but the recent ones use images that are harder to trace. Someone's learning, adapting their methods. The Fresno cases had one additional element that our Sacramento investigation lacked: witnesses. 2 of their victims had been seen leaving restaurants with their dates, and the descriptions were consistent. A woman in her early 30s, brown hair, always wearing dark clothing, always insisting on driving. She's got a type, Foster observed. Tall, dark-haired men, probably reminds her of someone specific. This is personal for her, not random. We returned to Sacramento with copies of the Fresno files and a growing understanding that we were dealing with a serial predator. Foster coordinated with our cybercrime unit to monitor dating platforms for new profiles matching the pattern, while I reached out to other agencies throughout California. The breakthrough came on November 8th, 5 days after Rodriguez disappeared. A profile matching our suspect's methods appeared on Bumble, targeting men in the San Jose area. Our cybercrime team was ready. She's using a VPN to mask her location, but we've got partial geolocation data from her mobile device. Officer Kevin Park from Cybercrime told us. She's operating somewhere in the greater Sacramento metro area, probably moving between different locations to avoid detection. Foster and I coordinated with San Jose PD to set up surveillance at the suggested meeting location, a restaurant called Luna Rosa in downtown San Jose. We couldn't risk having an undercover officer pose as the victim since she'd already seen photos of her intended target, but we could watch and potentially follow her. The operation almost went sideways when our suspect didn't show up at Luna Rosa. But Park's team had been monitoring her digital activity, and she'd sent last-minute messages changing the location to a coffee shop called Grind Coffee on Market Street. She's paranoid, Foster noted as we repositioned our surveillance. Testing to see if her target is really alone, if he's being watched. At Grind Coffee, we finally got our first clear look at the woman we'd been hunting. She was exactly as witnesses had described, early 30s, brown hair, tall and athletic. But what struck me most was how normal she appeared. This wasn't someone who stood out in a crowd or triggered immediate suspicion. She waited at the coffee shop for 30 minutes, clearly expecting to meet someone who wasn't coming. When she realized she'd been stood up, her reaction was telling. Instead of disappointment or confusion, she showed anger, cold, controlled rage that suggested this wasn't about dating or romance at all. We followed her to a parking garage where she got into a silver 2017 Honda Accord with tinted windows. Foster and I maintained distance as she drove north on 101, eventually taking the exit towards Sacramento. She was heading home, and we were finally going to find out who she really was. The Honda led us to a residential complex in Elk Grove, one of those newer developments, with identical townhomes and manicured landscaping. She parked in the driveway of Unit 847 on Blackstone Drive and went inside carrying a large purse that could easily conceal restraints, weapons, or other tools. "We need a warrant," Foster said, but we both knew that could take hours. Rodriguez had been missing for 6 days, and if he was still alive, time was critical. That's when we heard it, a muffled sound coming from the garage of the suspect's townhome. It could have been a television or radio, but it could also have been a human voice calling for help. "Exigent circumstances," I said, reaching for my radio to call for backup and ambulance services. The woman who answered the door when we knocked was not the confident predator we'd been tracking. She was smaller somehow, defeated, as if she'd been expecting this moment for a long time. "My name is Detective Henderson with Sacramento PD," I said. "We have reason to believe you're holding someone against their will." She didn't deny it. She didn't ask for a lawyer. She just stepped aside and said, "They're in the garage. All of them." What we found in that garage is still under seal by the district attorney's office, but I can tell you that Rodriguez was alive. Barely conscious, dehydrated, but alive. The other victims from Fresno hadn't been as fortunate. The woman, whose real name was Jennifer Walsh, a former psychiatric nurse who'd lost her license 3 years earlier, confessed to everything during her interrogation. She'd been targeting men who resembled her ex-fiancé, a man named David Patterson who'd broken their engagement and married someone else in 2021. "I wanted them to understand," she told us during the interview. "To know what it felt like to be abandoned, to have your whole future taken away." Walsh was charged with multiple counts of kidnapping, assault, and murder. She pled guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life without parole. But here's what keeps me awake at night. During her psychological evaluation, she revealed that she'd been in contact with other women online, women who'd been betrayed by men and were looking for justice. The FBI is investigating possible connections to similar cases in other states, but that's above my clearance level. What I can tell you is that Walsh's methods were too sophisticated, too refined, for someone working alone. Someone taught her how to create untraceable profiles, how to avoid digital detection, how to isolate and control victims. 3 days after Walsh's arrest, Detective Foster received a call from Portland PD about a missing persons case involving a tall, dark-haired man who disappeared after a date with a woman he'd met online. The woman's profile used photos stolen from a different victim, but the methodology was identical. Have you ever felt uncomfortable during an online date? Like the person across from you was studying you instead of getting to know you? What's the strangest question someone's asked you on a dating app? Because after working this case, I can tell you that some people aren't looking for love, they're shopping for victims. Be careful who you meet online, especially if they're pushing for isolation or secrecy. The most dangerous predators don't look like monsters, they look like the perfect match. I've been a highway patrol officer with the California Highway Patrol for 14 years, and what we uncovered in December 2023 made me realize how easily our desire to help others can be weaponized against us. What started as reports of suspicious activity on Highway 99 revealed a criminal operation that had been targeting Good Samaritans for over 18 months. The pattern first came to my attention on December 12 when I was patrolling the stretch of Highway 99 between Modesto and Merced in Unit 78, a 2022 Ford Taurus Police Interceptor. Dispatch had received 3 separate calls about a suspicious breakdown near mile marker 47, a burgundy 2015 Nissan Altima with its hood up and hazard lights flashing. "What makes it suspicious?" I asked dispatcher Sarah Kim over the radio. "Multiple callers report the same vehicle has been in that exact spot for 3 days," Kim replied. "But every time someone stops to help, the driver waves them off and says help is coming. CHP tow records show no service calls for that location." I found the Altima exactly where callers had reported it, positioned on the shoulder with perfect visibility from both directions of traffic. The vehicle appeared genuinely disabled. Hood up, emergency flashers on, driver standing beside it looking distressed. But something felt wrong about the setup. The driver was a woman in her 40s, medium height with graying hair, wearing jeans and a CHP-style reflective vest that looked authentic from a distance. As I approached in my patrol vehicle, she began walking toward me with what appeared to be relief. "Thank God you're here, officer," she called out, holding up a cell phone. "My car died and I can't get signal to call for help. I've been waiting for hours." Standard procedure required me to run the vehicle's plates before engaging, so I radioed the information to dispatch. While waiting for the response, I observed the woman more carefully. Her distress seemed genuine, but there were inconsistencies. Her clothes were too clean for someone who'd been stranded for hours, and the reflective vest had subtle differences from official CHP gear. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Lisa Chun with the California Highway Patrol," I said, approaching on foot. "What seems to be the problem with your vehicle?" "It just died while I was driving," she replied, gesturing toward the engine compartment. "No warning, no strange sounds. Just lost all power and coasted to a stop here." I looked under the hood and immediately noticed something that confirmed my suspicions. The battery terminals were clean and tight, the belts were in good condition, and there were no obvious signs of mechanical failure. More importantly, I could hear the electric fuel pump running when she turned the key, which meant the engine should start. "When did you say this happened?" I asked. "About 2 hours ago," she replied, but dispatch chose that moment to respond with information that changed everything. "Unit 78, that plate comes back to a 2015 Nissan Altima reported stolen from a Walmart parking lot in Stockton 4 days ago. Registered owner is Maria Santos, age 67. The woman standing next to me was definitely not 67 years old. I placed my hand on my service weapon and took a step back. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the vehicle and place your hands where I can see them," I commanded. "This vehicle has been reported stolen." Her demeanor changed instantly. Gone was the helpless stranded motorist, replaced by someone calculating their options. She raised her hands but kept talking, trying to maintain her story. "There must be some mistake, officer. This is my car. I can show you the registration." That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On the ground near the rear of the vehicle were small electronic devices, no bigger than matchboxes, along with what appeared to be magnetic strips. GPS tracking devices, the kind used by private investigators and repo companies. "Back up against the guardrail and keep your hands visible," I ordered, calling for backup and requesting a K-9 unit for a vehicle search. While waiting for assistance, I questioned the woman, who eventually identified herself as Patricia Mueller, age 44, with a lengthy record of fraud and theft charges. But it was her explanation of the tracking devices that revealed the true scope of her operation. "I wasn't hurting anyone," she insisted. "Just collecting information for insurance companies. People who stop to help, they're good people, right? Insurance companies want to know about good people." It was a lie, but a sophisticated one. Mueller had been using the fake breakdown scenario to identify potential victims, people with enough compassion to stop and help a stranger, which also suggested they might have other exploitable qualities like trusting natures or comfortable financial situations. When backup arrived, we conducted a thorough search of the stolen Altima. What we found turned a simple theft case into something much more serious. Hidden in the trunk were dozens of GPS tracking devices, magnetic mount cameras, and a tablet computer containing detailed files on over 30 individuals. The files included photos, license plate numbers, home addresses, work schedules, and personal information gathered through social media research. Mueller had been following people for weeks after they stopped to help her, learning their routines, identifying vulnerabilities. "This isn't insurance work," my backup officer, Sergeant Michael Torres, observed as we reviewed the tablet contents. "This is stalking and surveillance for criminal purposes." We transported Mueller to the Stanislaus County Jail and began the process of contacting her victims. What we discovered was a criminal network that extended far beyond one woman with a fake breakdown. The first victim we contacted was Robert Kim, a 34-year-old teacher from Turlock who'd stopped to help Mueller 3 weeks earlier. Kim had noticed strange activity around his home recently. His garbage had been gone through, his mailbox had been tampered with, and he'd received suspicious phone calls asking about his daily routine. "I thought it was weird that someone would ask for help then turn down my offer," Kim told us during our interview. "She said AAA was coming, but I offered to give her a ride or let her use my phone. She seemed more interested in looking at my car than getting help." The second victim was even more disturbing. Sandra Martinez, a 28-year-old nurse from Modesto, had stopped to help Mueller 6 weeks earlier. Since then, Martinez had been the victim of identity theft, credit card fraud, and someone had attempted to break into her apartment twice. "I gave her my business card in case she needed medical help," Martinez explained. "I'm a registered nurse, so I always carry cards with my contact information." A few days later, I started getting calls from people claiming to be debt collectors, asking about accounts I'd never opened. As we investigated further, we discovered that Mueller was part of a larger operation involving at least 3 other individuals. They'd been using the Good Samaritan scam across multiple highways in Central California, targeting people who demonstrated helpful, trusting behavior. The operation worked like this. One person would stage a breakdown on a busy highway during peak travel times. When someone stopped to help, they'd engage them in conversation while secretly placing GPS trackers on their vehicles and gathering personal information. The stranded motorist would then decline help, claiming assistance was already coming. Once the victim left, the criminals would use the GPS data to follow them home, learn their schedules, and gather intelligence for future crimes. Some victims were targeted for burglary when their homes were known to be empty. Others became victims of identity theft using information gathered from mail theft and surveillance. The most disturbing aspect was how they selected their fake breakdown locations. They'd chosen spots where helpful people were likely to stop, near family-friendly destinations, in areas with good visibility and safe shoulder space. They were literally hunting for the most compassionate members of our community. During Mueller's interrogation, she revealed that the operation was directed by someone she knew only as Marcus, a man who provided the stolen vehicles, tracking equipment, and target selection criteria. She claimed he was running similar operations in Nevada, Arizona, and Oregon, using local associates to identify and exploit Good Samaritans. "Marcus said people who stop to help strangers are the best targets," Mueller told Detective Amy Foster, who'd been called in from Sacramento to assist with the case. "They're trusting, they have resources, and they don't expect to be victimized because they're trying to do good." The FBI opened an investigation into the interstate aspects of the case, but Mueller's information about Marcus was limited. She'd only met him twice, both times in public places, and all their communication had been through encrypted messaging apps that automatically deleted conversations. What we did discover was that the operation had been active for at least 2 years across multiple states. Highway patrol agencies in Nevada and Arizona confirmed similar cases, fake breakdowns used to target helpful motorists for various crimes including burglary, identity theft, and financial fraud. Mueller was eventually sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for interstate fraud, identity theft, and stalking charges. But her case revealed something that fundamentally changed how I view roadside assistance situations. The most vulnerable people on our highways aren't necessarily those who appear to be in distress. Sometimes the person asking for help is the predator, and the person offering assistance is the intended victim. Criminals have learned that our instinct to help others can be exploited just as easily as any other human weakness. 3 days after Mueller's conviction, I received a briefing about a new pattern emerging in Oregon and Washington. Fake breakdowns involving families with children, designed to make potential victims even more likely to stop and offer assistance. The tactics were evolving, becoming more sophisticated and harder to detect. Have you ever stopped to help someone whose car had broken down on the highway? Did anything about the situation seem off or inconsistent? What would you do if you realized someone might be using your kindness against you? Because after working this case, I can tell you that even our most generous impulses can be weaponized by people who understand human psychology. If you see someone who appears stranded on the highway, consider calling 911 instead of stopping directly. Professional help is safer for everyone involved, and it prevents criminals from exploiting the very compassion that makes our communities worth protecting. Next time you're driving and see what looks like a breakdown, remember Patricia Mueller. Sometimes the person who needs help the most is the one offering to provide it. I've been a detective with the Riverside Police Department for 16 years, and what happened in January 2024 connected 3 seemingly unrelated cases in a way that still makes me question how far people will go to validate their beliefs. What started as harassment complaints in a quiet neighborhood revealed the final piece of a puzzle that had been building across California for months. The case began on January 8th when I received my 3rd call in 2 weeks about suspicious activity on Sycamore Lane in the Woodcrest area. Residents were reporting strange occurrences that seemed to escalate each night: moved objects, unexplained sounds, and a woman who appeared to be conducting some kind of rituals in the common areas. I drove to the neighborhood in my unmarked 2020 Chevrolet Impala, arriving around 10 p.m. when the complaints typically started. Sycamore Lane was a typical middle-class street, well-maintained homes, decent lighting, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors and looked out for each other. The first person I spoke with was Janet Rodriguez, a 52-year-old accountant who lived at 1247 Sycamore. She'd been the most frequent caller to our department, reporting increasingly disturbing incidents over the past month. "Detective Morrison, I know how this sounds," Rodriguez said, inviting me into her living room. "But someone is deliberately trying to make us think our neighborhood is haunted. They're moving our porch decorations, leaving strange symbols on our driveways, and playing recordings of voices late at night." Rodriguez showed me photos she'd taken of the incidents. Porch furniture rearranged in geometric patterns, chalk symbols drawn on sidewalks, and what appeared to be small electronic devices hidden in bushes around her property. "The woman who's doing this lives in the rental house at the end of the street," Rodriguez continued. "She moved in about 6 weeks ago and immediately started telling everyone about the spiritual energy of the neighborhood. She claims she's a medium and that the spirits are trying to communicate through her." I walked through Rodriguez's backyard, where she showed me more evidence of tampering. Her garden gnomes had been arranged in a circle around her bird bath, and there were small speakers hidden among her plants, battery-powered devices that could play pre-recorded sounds on a timer. "Has anyone confronted this woman directly?" I asked. "My neighbor Tom Wilson tried to talk to her last week," Rodriguez replied. "She told him that the spirits were angry about our disbelief and that the activity would continue until we acknowledged their presence." She said she was just the messenger. I interviewed 4 other residents who'd experienced similar incidents. All reported the same pattern, minor disturbances that escalated over time, always occurring at night, always with a supernatural theme. But the technical sophistication of the harassment suggested someone with planning and resources, not random vandalism. The woman in question lived at 1298 Sycamore Lane, a small rental house at the end of a cul-de-sac. According to property records, the tenant was listed as Rebecca Walsh, a name that immediately caught my attention. Rebecca Walsh was the sister of Jennifer Walsh, the woman who'd been convicted in Sacramento for kidnapping and murdering men she'd met through dating apps. The woman whose case had been connected to similar incidents in Fresno, and who'd claimed to be part of a larger network of people seeking justice for perceived wrongs. I called Detective Angela Foster in Sacramento to confirm the connection. Her response sent a chill down my spine. Rebecca Walsh has been on our radar since her sister's arrest, Foster told me. She's been posting on social media about spiritual warfare and making non-believers pay. We've been monitoring her activity, but she hadn't committed any crimes we could prosecute. Until now, I replied, looking at the evidence Rodriguez had collected. I approached Rebecca Walsh's house around 11 p.m., when Rodriguez had reported the most activity. The house was dark except for candles flickering in the windows and what appeared to be projection equipment casting moving shadows on the walls. Walsh answered the door wearing a flowing black dress and multiple crystal necklaces. She was in her early 40s, with long gray-streaked hair and an intense stare that immediately put me on edge. Detective Morrison, Riverside Police Department, I said, showing my badge. I'm investigating harassment complaints in this neighborhood. The spirits told me you were coming, Walsh replied without surprise. They're not happy about the interference. The neighbors need to understand that some things are beyond human control. Ms. Walsh, I need to ask you about some specific incidents that have been reported. I continued. Residents say you've been trespassing on their property and using electronic devices to create disturbances. She smiled in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of her sister's mugshot. I don't trespass, Detective. I go where the spirits guide me. And I don't use electronic devices. I channel spiritual energy. That's when I noticed something that confirmed my suspicions. Behind Walsh, on her kitchen counter, I could see a tablet computer displaying what appeared to be a neighborhood map with various houses marked. Next to it were small electronic devices, timers, and what looked like a collection of keys. Ma'am, I'm going to need to speak with you about some missing property from your neighbors' homes, I said. Several residents report that items have been taken from their porches and yards. Walsh's demeanor shifted slightly. The spirits sometimes move objects to send messages. I just interpret what they're trying to communicate. And how do the spirits get past locked doors and security systems? I asked. That question seemed to break through her supernatural facade. For a moment, she looked like someone who'd been caught in a lie rather than a mystical medium channeling otherworldly forces. I have special abilities, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. The spirits show me how to access the places that need cleansing. I asked Walsh if she'd consent to a search of her property, knowing she'd likely refuse. But to my surprise, she agreed, with the condition that I respect the spiritual nature of what I might find. What I found in Rebecca Walsh's house was the command center for a sophisticated harassment campaign. The tablet computer contained detailed information about each neighbor, their schedules, their habits, their personal beliefs about religion and spirituality. She'd been conducting surveillance for weeks, learning when people were home, when they were vulnerable, when they'd be most likely to attribute strange occurrences to supernatural causes. In her garage, I found the missing items from neighbors' properties, garden decorations, porch furniture, even mail that had been stolen from boxes. But more disturbing were the electronic devices, motion sensors, sound recorders, small projectors, and remote-controlled speakers that could be hidden around the neighborhood and activated from her house. Walsh had been creating an elaborate illusion of supernatural activity using technology and psychology. She'd target houses when residents were asleep, use hidden speakers to play strange sounds, move objects to create mysterious patterns, and project shadows onto walls to simulate ghostly figures. Why? I asked during her interview at the station. Why terrorize people who were just trying to live their lives? Walsh's answer revealed the connection to the larger pattern we've been tracking across California. My sister Jennifer was right about people, Walsh said. They're weak, they're gullible, they believe what they want to believe. She showed me how easy it is to manipulate people who think they're safe in their comfortable little lives. But Jennifer targeted specific individuals, I pointed out. You were terrorizing an entire neighborhood. I was proving a point, Walsh replied. These people think they understand the world, think they're in control. I showed them how quickly their reality can be shattered by someone who understands their fears. Walsh's harassment campaign had been a deliberate attempt to destabilize a community, to make people question their perceptions and feel unsafe in their own homes. She'd been using their beliefs about the supernatural against them, exploiting their fears and superstitions to cause maximum psychological damage. During the investigation, we discovered that Walsh had been in contact with other individuals online, people who shared her philosophy about teaching lessons to unsuspecting communities. The FBI investigation that had started with her sister's case now expanded to include psychological warfare tactics being used by a loose network of individuals across multiple states. Walsh was charged with harassment, stalking, burglary, and theft. She pled guilty to avoid additional federal charges and was sentenced to 6 years in state prison. But the damage to the Sycamore Lane community was lasting. Several families moved away, others installed expensive security systems, and the neighborhood's sense of safety and trust never fully recovered. The case files from Patricia Mueller's highway tracking operation, Jennifer Walsh's dating app murders, and Rebecca Walsh's supernatural harassment campaign revealed a disturbing pattern. 3 individuals, operating in different parts of California, using different methods but sharing the same underlying philosophy, that ordinary people were weak, gullible, and deserved to be victimized for their trust and compassion. Whether they were coordinating directly or just sharing ideas through online communities, these criminals had found ways to weaponize basic human emotions and instincts. Jennifer Walsh had exploited the desire for romantic connection. Patricia Mueller had exploited the impulse to help others. Rebecca Walsh had exploited the fear of the unknown and the supernatural. 3 days after Rebecca Walsh's sentencing, I received a call from the FBI task force investigating the network. They'd identified similar cases in 12 states, individuals using different methods but sharing the same predatory philosophy about exploiting human psychology for criminal purposes. Have you ever experienced something in your neighborhood that you couldn't explain? Strange sounds, moved objects, or occurrences that seemed supernatural? What would you do if you discovered that someone was deliberately trying to make you question your own perceptions? Because after working this case, I can tell you that sometimes the most frightening thing isn't what we don't understand, it's what people are willing to do to make us afraid. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong in your community. Document incidents, talk to your neighbors, and don't hesitate to call law enforcement if you suspect deliberate harassment. The most dangerous predators aren't supernatural. They're the ones who understand human psychology well enough to make us believe in ghosts when we should be looking for criminals. And if you're ever tempted to think that these kinds of coordinated attacks on communities are isolated incidents, remember the Walsh sisters, Patricia Mueller, and the network they represented. Sometimes the most ordinary neighborhoods can become battlegrounds in a war most people don't even know is being fought. The rain may wash away the chalk symbols and electronic devices, but the fear and distrust these predators leave behind can last for years. That's exactly what they're counting on. I've been a patrol officer with the Bakersfield Police Department for 11 years, and what happened in February 2024 taught me how quickly a community can turn against someone based on fear and assumptions rather than facts. What started as routine neighbor complaints revealed how the criminal network we'd been tracking had poisoned entire communities with paranoia and suspicion. The case began on February 14th when I received my 4th call in a week about suspicious activity from a man who'd recently moved to Oleander Avenue in the Panorama Bluffs area. The caller, Margaret Foster, was convinced her new neighbor was planning something dangerous. "Officer Ramirez, I'm telling you, something is very wrong with this man," Foster insisted when I arrived at her house in Unit 34, a 2023 Ford Explorer Police Interceptor. "He moved in 3 weeks ago, and since then, weird things have been happening all over the neighborhood." Foster was a retired teacher in her 60s who'd lived on Oleander Avenue for 15 years. She knew every resident and was clearly shaken by recent events. According to her, the new neighbor David Martinez, age 43, had been acting suspiciously since moving into the rental house at 2847 Oleander. "What kind of suspicious behavior?" I asked, taking notes. "He works strange hours, comes and goes at all times of day and night. He installed security cameras all around his property, and he's always watching from his windows. Plus, ever since he moved in, we've had break-ins, missing packages, and strange sounds at night." I'd heard similar complaints from other residents throughout the week. The picture they painted was of a man who seemed paranoid, antisocial, and potentially dangerous. Multiple neighbors had reported seeing him taking photos of their houses, following their daily routines, and acting aggressively when approached. But something about the situation felt familiar. After working the Rebecca Walsh case in Riverside, I'd learned to recognize the signs of community paranoia that could be either genuine or manufactured. The timing of Martinez's arrival and the immediate escalation of problems seemed too convenient. I drove to 2847 Oleander Avenue to speak with Martinez directly. The house was a modest 2-bedroom rental in a working-class neighborhood. The security cameras Foster had mentioned were clearly visible professional-grade equipment that seemed excessive for the area. Martinez answered the door cautiously, and I immediately understood why neighbors might find him intimidating. He was tall, probably 6'4", with dark hair and a serious expression. But his demeanor was polite and cooperative, not threatening. "Officer Ramirez, thank you for coming," Martinez said, inviting me inside. "I've been hoping someone would investigate what's been happening in this neighborhood." Martinez's story painted a completely different picture than what I'd heard from his neighbors. He was a freelance cybersecurity consultant who worked irregular hours for clients across different time zones. The security cameras had been installed after someone had broken into his house twice during his first week. "I moved here from San Diego for a fresh start after my divorce," Martinez explained, showing me photos of damage to his property. "But from day one, I've been treated like a criminal. My trash gets scattered across my yard, my car has been keyed, and someone threw a rock through my kitchen window last weekend." The photos Martinez showed me documented systematic harassment. Graffiti on his garage door calling him a freak and psycho. Damage to his landscaping. Evidence that someone had been going through his garbage and mailbox. "Why do you think your neighbors are treating you this way?" I asked. Martinez hesitated before answering. "I think they're scared. There have been some real problems in this neighborhood: break-ins, vandalism, stolen packages. But instead of looking for the actual criminal, they've decided I'm the convenient outsider to blame." I spent the next hour reviewing Martinez's documentation of the harassment. He'd been methodical about recording incidents, taking photos, and filing reports with the property management company. Nothing in his behavior suggested criminal activity. If anything, he seemed like someone desperately trying to prove his innocence. "Mr. Martinez, have you noticed any patterns to when these incidents occur?" I asked. "Usually when I'm not home," he replied. "My work requires me to travel occasionally for client meetings. Every time I'm gone for more than a day, I come back to find new damage or evidence that someone's been on my property." That detail caught my attention. Someone was monitoring Martinez's schedule, waiting for opportunities to cause problems while ensuring he couldn't provide an alibi. This wasn't random harassment, it was coordinated and deliberate. I interviewed 3 more neighbors that afternoon, and their stories began to reveal inconsistencies. The timeline of incidents they described didn't always match when Martinez was actually home. Some of the suspicious behavior they'd witnessed occurred during times when Martinez could prove he was out of town. Mrs. Chin at 2851 Oleander claimed she'd seen Martinez casing her house at 2 a.m. on February 10th. But Martinez had been in Los Angeles meeting with a client, and had hotel receipts and security footage to prove it. Mr. Thompson at 2843 Oleander insisted Martinez had been taking photos of his children walking to school. But the school district confirmed that Martinez had never been seen near the elementary school, and his phone's location data showed he was home during school hours. The more I investigated, the more I realized that David Martinez wasn't the neighborhood's problem, he was its scapegoat. Someone was using the community's fear and suspicion to destroy an innocent man's life while continuing their own criminal activities undetected. That evening, I set up surveillance on Oleander Avenue, parking my unmarked 2019 Honda Accord at the end of the street where I could observe Martinez's house and the surrounding area. What I witnessed over the next several hours confirmed my suspicions. Around 11 p.m., I saw a figure moving between houses, staying in shadows and avoiding streetlights. The person was wearing dark clothing and moved with purpose, not the random behavior of a teenager or vandal. They approached Martinez's house, did something to his mailbox, then moved on to Mrs. Chen's property. I followed at a distance and watched as the figure scattered trash across Martinez's yard before breaking into Chen's garden shed. This was the real criminal, using Martinez as a distraction while continuing to victimize the neighborhood. The person I arrested that night was Amanda Foster, Margaret Foster's 34-year-old daughter who'd been living with her mother since losing her job 6 months earlier. Amanda had been committing the break-ins, stealing packages, and vandalizing property while her mother unknowingly provided the perfect cover by directing suspicion toward Martinez. "I needed money," Amanda confessed during her interview. "But when the new guy moved in and everyone started getting paranoid, I realized I could keep doing whatever I wanted as long as they kept blaming him." Amanda's scheme was brilliantly simple. She'd commit crimes when Martinez was away, then spread rumors about suspicious behavior she'd supposedly witnessed. She'd even damaged Martinez's property herself to make it look like he was trying to deflect suspicion. The case connected to the broader pattern we'd been tracking across California. Amanda had been active on social media groups where people shared strategies for dealing with suspicious neighbors and protecting communities from outsiders. The same online spaces where Jennifer Walsh, Patricia Mueller, and Rebecca Walsh had found inspiration for their own criminal activities. But Amanda's crimes were different. Instead of being the direct predator, she'd turned an entire community into unwitting accomplices. She'd weaponized their fear and prejudice to destroy an innocent man while providing cover for her own criminal behavior. Martinez was vindicated, but the damage was lasting. Several neighbors apologized, but others remained convinced he was somehow involved despite the evidence. He moved out of the neighborhood 2 weeks later, unable to rebuild relationships with people who'd been so quick to assume the worst about him. Amanda Foster was charged with burglary, vandalism, and filing false police reports. She received 3 years in prison, but the real consequence was the destruction of a community's trust and cohesion. Neighbors who'd once looked out for each other now viewed each other with suspicion. The case taught me that the criminal network we'd been tracking wasn't just about individual predators, it was about people who understood how to exploit social dynamics, fear, and prejudice to achieve their goals. Whether they were directly harming victims or using communities as weapons, they shared the same fundamental insight about human psychology. 3 days after Amanda's conviction, I received a call from a detective in Phoenix about a similar case, a military veteran being harassed by neighbors who'd been convinced he was dangerous by someone who turned out to be the real criminal. Have you ever been suspicious of a new neighbor? What made you think they might be dangerous? How well do you really know the people you're accusing of crimes? Because after working this case, I can tell you that the most dangerous person in your neighborhood might be the one pointing fingers at everyone else. Sometimes the real criminal is hiding in plain sight, using your fear and suspicion as a shield while they destroy innocent lives. The next time your community turns against an outsider, ask yourself who benefits from that distraction and what they might be hiding while everyone's looking the other way. David Martinez lost his sense of safety, his faith in community, and his belief that being law-abiding would protect him from false accusations. That's exactly what Amanda Foster was counting on, and exactly what the network she'd learned from wanted to achieve. The rain might wash away the graffiti and the evidence, but the damage to trust and community takes much longer to heal. And sometimes it never does. Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.